Hi, welcome to Candor Beach. Today we're talking about how to write a Hollywood hit. So recently we've seen a bunch of these movies come out, like Barbie's hit $1 billion. Oppenheimer from Christopher Nolan was touted to be a success. You've had The Little Mermaid come out. You've had Snow White. You're going to have Snow White come out soon. So Sailesh, what are your thoughts on these movies? What, in your opinion, distinguishes these movies? Or in general,
So
like what do you see today?
yeah, so if you look at it, like I like Christopher Nolan movies. So the reason why we like well-made movies, well-tailored movies is one, is the screenplay. The screenplay is well written, and then the director. The director brings out the best part of the actors. So if you look at it, Christopher Nolan, in during Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Returns, one of the best movies. So it's a mixture of Christian Bale with a proper tie-up with Christopher Nolan. Was one of the best Batmans. But
Yeah,
if you
I
take
understand, but if you could break it down, like in terms of what was so appealing about The Dark Knight that your or
okay,
Inception or
so
Interstellar or Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's got a massive library.
sure. Christopher Nolan, the detail he goes to, like if you look at Interstellar, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in Interstellar, when they land on the other planet, when they land, there is a ticking right behind the noise. So that ticking is basically, every day passing on Earth. So there is the time difference, right? So when you go in there, you pass through when you go at the speed of light or you go through a wormhole, your time becomes, it's not the same. So
Special
attention to
relativity.
detail like that.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan movies are very good with attention to detail.
Even in Inception with that spinning top towards the end where he like left something to the audience to for the audience to imagine.
Exactly.
I think another aspect that you had brought up was when you bring in Christian Bale, when you bring in Heath Ledger, when you bring in a fantastic cast, and Hathaway as well. Like when you bring in a fantastic cast, a talented cast, there is this whole chemistry that these movies spell out. It's a great
Mhm.
storyline. You have fantastic actors who carry their weight. You have fantastic direction in terms of direction and production in terms of the lighting, the choices in costume or set production, everything I think about Christopher Nolan's movies, pardon me, were fantastic. But today we see aspects of, let's say, with I'm going to name it like with Disney, you have them rebooting franchise after franchise. Like they bought Star Wars off of Lucasfilms and then made episode 7, 8, 9, which wasn't like as a Star Wars fan, I think many of us were disappointed with how 789 came to be because there were aspects like gender swapping or race swapping. Like you had a main female character, fine, like, but Leia was also a main female character. It wasn't like Star Wars neglected that. Then uh, you had people come in like with some of their other movies like Snow White. They've
Mhm.
swapped the race of a bunch of the dwarves. Snow White, the literal description, like if you want to stay true to the books, the literal description why she was named Snow White was because her skin was white as snow, her hair was black as ebony, her lips were ruby red. Like those were the aspects that you want for the character to embody. At least the main character needs to embody that. Like how much do you want to leave to the imagination of the audience when you have the technology available today? So I see these aspects of like building franchises or taking franchises and then milking them. You have reboots coming in with Snow White. You have aspects of that I believe wokeism has brought in that
Yeah.
I think are a little detrimental to the industry. What else do we see? I think, like, Sailesh, your opinion on the writer's strike and how that's going to influence Hollywood now.
The writer's strike is pretty. We lost a lot of movies because of writer's strike. Like Deadpool 3 was supposed to come out. Deadpool 3 is.
So we didn't lose them. They've been pushed. They've been pushed.
I mean, yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. So That is there, and I mean the AI, AI can take over writing, like screenplay, but
Do you
it
think
has
so?
a little bit. I think so. I think so. They should make use of AI to
You
probably.
know, with the generative AI, there was this conversation where they said that human beings have creativity and AI
Mm,
cannot replicate that. And that is
mm.
going to be the delta. That is going to make sure that human beings, if they're in creative roles, are going to survive longer than some of the other jobs that are more operational that can be automated. How
So if
far, like by the sounds of it, you don't seem to agree with that.
Yeah, because I think AI has enough knowledge, like how it's trained. If it's able to, I mean, it's able to create art, very creative art, which is completely new. So why not creative writing? Why only art with regards to like paintings or something like that? Why not good writing? So I think in just I think few more 1 or 2 years more, once the artificial intelligence sharpens up, I think that's where it's going to go. Like writers can be replaced with artificial intelligence writing, generative writing.
You know what? With OpenAI, there was this project, I think they stopped in January or started in January, I can't remember. It was about identifying content that was written by AI. They had a 30% accuracy. So they gave up. They closed that project down because they couldn't tell what was written by AI and what was written by a human
It-
being.
exactly. So if somebody writes something and they run it through Grammarly,
Mm.
it's almost very close to what AI is going to write. So, if if there's no any grammatical errors, and there is good grammar, I don't think you would be able to differentiate if it's AI or human.
What about Gen Z slang?
Well, we can integrate Urban Dictionary to AI.
Oh, that's going to be dangerous. All right, so you have we've talked about the milking of franchisees. We've talked about rebooting, race swapping. There is this whole push into. There's a very liberal push, and I don't want to harp on that topic too much, but like with what was that not Captain Marvel, but the movie after that where there was this uh she was a part of the last Doctor Strange movie.
Um,
You know who I'm
and
talking about, right? Like that
yeah,
a girl
and
with the
you gave
power to create
like a brain.
like star-shaped
Yeah,
powers. She could travel through, she could portal through different universes. Like
yeah.
she
I
had,
mean, that was part of Doctor Strange. Was yeah, was
yeah, it
that
was
was
part of the
Doctor
last
Strange?
Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah,
The thing was, she had like
two
I
moms.
don't I don't understand why you bring that in. I'm not
Yeah,
against
it has
it. Like
no
I would
significance.
support LGBTQ any day, but at the same time, they have to make sense. Like beyond saying, "Oh, we accept you," it can't just be lip service. And I feel like a lot of movies are just doing that to say that, "Oh, we believe in you," or "We are look at how we are committing to." Like there are certain Indian dramas like Made in Heaven where you had that whole gay angle to it. It was a pivotal role played by a character who was not a sideline character. There it made sense. Like there it was actually growing into something. It was a part of the story. But here where you had lesbian moms for 5 seconds on the screen and then one of them
Very important.
disappears, what are you trying to get at? I
I
don't
feel like
understand.
I
There's
feel
no
like
character
eventually
development there, right?
I feel like eventually all the movies gonna get like an ESG score.
Yeah, thank you, BlackRock. Um,
Yeah, I mean, how well you're gonna market these movies depends on the ESG scores.
that would be a nightmare. But yeah, you were saying generative AI, you think is going to take over the
It's
writers'
gonna take over, yeah.
jobs. And
The writing part of it can be replaced by generative AI. If
in which
so,
case, should studios succumb to writers' requests? Like what writers are hoping for is a pay raise for the more average writers. And when I
Sure.
say
I mean,
average, I don't mean by talent, I mean by recognition specifically.
see that's part that part gets into, like how well they're getting paid, how well they're not. It depends on the studios which is actually paying. But the thing is, they shouldn't be just because of doing that. They shouldn't just stop the entire industry. They're basically trying to collapse the industry so that they can get paid. A lot of
They're
movies
holding
that
the industry ransom.
exactly. So
Right.
that shouldn't be done. So if you really want to get a pay raise, do your job. Write a good movie and ask for it, but not just boycott it and stop everything.
No, in my opinion, you can't use unions to just you can't use unions to like hold a bat over management.
Yeah.
Because if you believe that you ought to be paid more, look for a job where you're going to be paid more. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, it's all market economics, demand and supply. If there is an excessive supply, there is only so much I can do. But if you hold the industry hostage, are you being fair? You are talking about unfair play from the administration side, but what are you doing? Or
They're
is this
causing
like a
livelihoods for other people too, just not writers. So if like, because people are going to consume content regardless. They're going to move on to YouTube. They're going to move on to like movies which
no?
are
We'll talk about that towards the
yeah.
later
So
half for sure. But yeah,
they're not going to sit down and worry about
wait
a
for
Hollywood
you.
movie. So they're going to consume content regardless. So they like there are movies which come up without from not from Hollywood, which are self-made movies. People will still consume that. So there are very good movies which are with a very small budget coming out, and just people take random movies.
Or with
So they,
globalization, with the rise of, let's say, Korean content, with
yeah,
Bollywood content, even like I'm not reliant on Hollywood for my content. I can get it from Korea, I can get
yeah.
it from Bollywood, Tollywood, wherever.
And
Yeah,
then you
so
have this now you can have language change, so you can have a Korean movie, watch it in English, like that actually helps. So I know people who are in America, trying to figure out a bunch of these movies. So
what do you mean by figure out a bunch of these movies? Like make these?
yeah, so
Wow.
yeah, those are stuff which are very, very, like, if you look at these movies, right? So there are these movies, they make from Korea, and you have the entire language change. So there is no hindrance in between. So you can watch a Korean movie in English.
Right, like we are past the era of subtitles and now we are straight up into an era where AI is just going to fix my language for me in real time. I
Yeah.
understand. So generative AI is a massive ingredient in the future of Hollywood. What else? Like we've seen the power of social media marketing. Like when you come up with a new movie, you have your posters, you have campaigns, you have your actors and actresses running endorsements or attending events to promote their movie or TV show. And then you have a lot of social media content around it, which creates a buzz. And there is the whole availability bias, right? Like you're creating massive availability, you're creating this conversation around a single topic. So people automatically gravitate towards it. They're like, okay, maybe this is significant. Maybe this is something I need to consider. Like up
Mhm.
until hearing that Barbie had hit the 1 billion mark, I don't know if you and I even considered the possibility of watching the movie because like when I heard the reviews, I wasn't for it. But after it hit the 1 billion mark, I was like, maybe
Yeah,
this is something
I
that
changed my
it's got
mind too.
social proofing. Like audiences clearly like it. Otherwise, 1 billion is not a small mark. It's quite
Yeah.
significant. Miss Gerwig has done a fantastic job, one way or another.
No,
So
I
we
mean,
go ahead.
in genres wise too, like like I do miss comedy movies. Like there are not a good, you don't like if you look at Deadpool, right? There is erotic comedy. You don't see movies like that anymore. It's just about, which is lacking in the industry. Maybe it might be because of the writer's strike, but like I wanted Deadpool
Look, the
3 to
writer's
come.
strike is recent, and I understand. I get that you are sore about not getting Deadpool 3. But I am going to say this. The fact that you've touched upon comedy, what is one of the most common, the most popular genres out there in short form content on social media? Comedy.
Yeah,
People love comedy. Like
me.
the quintessential part of entertainment is comedy.
Yeah.
And yeah, and maybe that's something that Hollywood's missing, or that's something, one of the key ingredients that we can talk about. There are a couple of other points. The anti-hero, there has been a rise of the anti-hero recently. You've
Yeah.
seen Black Adam come up. You had Deadpool come up in 2016, Suicide Squad, the Joker as
Nope.
well.
Yeah.
We are seeing the rise of a new genre. Thoughts on the impact, or do you think that that's the storyline that we should pursue? Why did they did well as well, right? Like they weren't well as well. They did well for themselves. What are your thoughts on that? Is that like an impactful line that people should be exploring?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the comedy or any other genre, right? So especially if you what do you call these the new movies? Like you remember Dumb and Dumber,
I never watched it.
Jim Carrey.
I haven't watched it.
Yeah, so Jim Carrey, like if you look at Jim Carrey movies, you don't see that kind of acting or that kind of storyline coming in the new era. So yeah, I understand when you saying like the newer movies don't have all these the how well it's attractive to the older ones. There is a
I
there
didn't
is a
actually say
gap.
that, but I would like to. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean there is a gap. So just in just with comedy on the the new the online social media comedy and the movie yeah, the movies itself, you don't see any new comedy movies if you look at it,
Let's
anything.
ignore comedy as a genre for a second here,
Mhm.
and I would say I agree with your perspective of there isn't much that is new, and I'm going to extend that to aspects in dialogue, aspects in storyline. There
Mm.
is great repetition that's going on because people are looking at specifically the marketability of movies. And I think
Yeah.
that is to the detriment of telling good stories. And we'll get to that. But there is one final ingredient in the whole trend space that we've talked about the repeat of franchises, like people milking franchises and reboots. We've talked about
Yeah, and
the writer's strike. We've
and
talked about
yours.
generative AI. We've talked about the impact of wokeism in today's content. We've talked about the power of social media marketing. We've also got to how we are seeing certain spectrums come up, and they are more anti-establishment of sorts, primarily because like you typically want the protagonist to win and have a wonderful life and such. But then you have seen Gen Z, particularly Gen Z, millennials, us millennials, uh, we have been anti-establishment to an extent, particularly Gen Z, but I think was started by millennials. There is this whole trend of anti-establishmentarianism, and I think that the anti-hero embodies that sentiment. And that is why I think those movies are doing well. There are other ingredients to it, like you've pointed out, comedy,
So the
solid.
anti-hero, I think the anti-hero thing started with the TV show Narcos, right? So when you're rooting for Pablo Escobar, that's basically it. You watching the TV show, you're rooting for the guy to smuggle more cocaine, so you're it's basically the entire thing, right? So you're doing, yeah, I mean it does show that how bad he is, but you're looking at it and that's the anti-hero the start of anti-hero. Eventually, then the
I would also say
society collapsed.
vampires then. All the
Yeah,
vampire movies.
you look at Twilight. You're rooting for the vampire to basically take over her. So
I don't know.
the,
Like I don't know. I was just throwing out vampires there, but yeah. And
I mean that's the story of Twilight too, right? You're looking for her to become part of the family. The entire series is
wait,
that way,
I
right?
don't know. I don't know, but all right, I'll take your word for it. I watched one of them, like one or two of the movies. But
Yeah.
yeah, the final element that I'd like to talk about or touch upon before we move on to a breakdown of the trends that we've seen is a spotlight on sex. Like I
Yeah.
understand that over the last decade, maybe like there's been this massive focus on sex. Like you have OnlyFans coming up and
That's the
people talking about massive money that's being made on OnlyFans. You've talked about the ban of pornography in India. You've been talking about, in my opinion, arbitrary sex scenes in movies. They've been bubbling up in movies and they have had nothing to do with the storyline. There are sex scenes where you are developing the character of whoever is in question there, like the parties in question. But then there are sex scenes that are just there for the sex, for the sake of, my God, for the sake of sex.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that has the desired impact. It's literally banking on the fact that sex sells. It is literally banking on a generation which seems sex deprived, very sexless, and is fantasizing about maybe being in that. I don't, I'm not quite sure. I'm
I mean,
speculating here, but uh, they seem to sell it. Like, otherwise, why would movies keep bringing them up? Why would TV shows have so much of it? Why
yeah.
are like I'm going to end the argument right there,
Look
but
at
yeah.
look. I feel like Barbie touched one billion because everybody was sexualizing Margot Robbie. So
But
that's
that's been happening since the dawn of time, right? Like you've had,
yeah.
I don't want to say Judy Garland, but you've had Marilyn Monroe, who is a sex symbol. And
Mm.
today we are talking about bringing in equality, bringing in the kind of uh, bringing in the kind of semblance where women are respected, women are treated as equals, and then you and then you work out storylines which objectify them. It's not playing fair, or it's not progressing in the direction that it ought to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You need to give them
So
strong character lines. Like I think Barbie was a female-centric movie and did a wonderful job. Wonder Woman was a female-centric movie, did a wonderful job. The Little Mermaid, sort of
yeah.
female-centric, if you know, anachronistic to an extent. It was written ages ago. But that's what you need basically. Like Priyanka Chopra's movies, or the choice, her choice of movies and TV shows that she's participated in, they've always embodied a strong character. Like you can't get rid of Priyanka Chopra from the storyline and not strongly impact the story. And that's something that I deeply admire. Like that's something where you are bringing in strong female characters. They're not just there for the heck of it. They're not just there to be sexualized. They're not objects. And I think we need more of that, not random sex scenes because people come in and watch it.
Mm.
But yeah, now let's progress to a breakdown of what we've seen. I would say that, like, in my opinion, movies today are being made because purely from a marketable perspective. Like, Disney is making movies that will drive you to, or they're creating products that will drive you to their ecosystem of their amusement parks. Star Wars. Now you have Star Wars in Disneyland, like stormtroopers walking about. Excuse me, a Darth Vader, Snow White, The Little Mermaid, Mickey Mouse. They are, well, I don't know if they're coming up with more Mickey Mouse movies, but Snow White for sure. You have people that you're driving towards your amusement parks. You are creating merchandise that you can sell to these people. The Wizarding World is now a very marketable brand, leveraging J.K. Rowling's intellectual property and now commercializing it to a point where, like, I'd gone to Universal Studio a few years ago, I think 2017, if I remember correctly. And
Yeah,
there was this terrible t-shirt, like very cheap
I remember
t-shirt,
you telling me this.
$40 for
Yeah,
a for what looked like a flimsy t-shirt that, like, if put in the
39.99.
light, if put in sunlight, would read mischief managed. And I was sorely tempted to buy, because I understand, like, you're in a capitalist market and these are things that are attractive, but then it feels like you're building movies just to make a marketable product.
Yeah,
Barbie, Mattel, like Mattel is benefiting tremendously from Barbie. Like, why did Barbie come out when it did? Because studies show that typically Barbie dolls are purchased around Thanksgiving, like Black Friday and Christmas. They're fantastic
mhm.
gifts, right? They have been gifts for
Yeah. I mean,
generations now. And
marketing, perfect
yeah,
marketing, right?
and now because I've posted it slightly before then, you are going to have a longer sales season.
Yeah.
Similarly, like movies around, and I wouldn't be surprised if now the luxury brands have gotten into, and this is a quick aside, luxury brands have gotten into food just to create a more marketable brand. And that's fair play. Like, that's something that as a business you're allowed to do. As a business, you are going to want to do. And you should be allowed to do that. If you can create a
Designer
movie
bar.
around, yeah, like if you can create a movie around, like, you've got The Devil Wears Prada. I'm sure that the fact that you had Prada in that, in the concept there, pushed Prada sales, because you are
Yeah.
bringing it into, there is a certain degree of social proofing, there's a certain degree of availability that's being created, and that's fair play. Like, as a brand, I would encourage them to do that. But that's an aspect that we need to consider. This is something that has influenced movies and the creation of movies. They are all woke fluenced. And wokeism has influenced our movies
Most
tremendously.
of the
Like,
industry, yeah,
you
is.
see gender swapping, you see race swapping. Like you said, like, that's very unnecessary. You create movies that center around those characters, center around a strong female character, center around African Americans, and that's fantastic. Like, everything,
Yeah.
everywhere, all at once, Asian cast. Now, let's say that it was a fantastic story, and that is why it was given its time in the sunlight, as opposed to, oh, that this is a diverse movie, and therefore we should award it with a half a dozen awards. Like, let's not make Hollywood about that, because that would be to the detriment of general content creation. What else? Like, what comes to your mind?
So I think they should even in Oscars, right? It's just like
Can be lip
nowadays.
service.
Yeah, so they have these point system, whereas how well these new movies are catering to the book, or like how well, how many points are they going to gain? It's like an ESG score for the movies, right? Only those get Oscars, and that's why if you look at it, Oscars over a period of time lost a lot of viewers, and it went down. The viewership of Oscars went down a lot. Last year was the least viewed Oscars. I believe that it was even in Fox News. They were talking about how Oscars viewership went down.
Break it down. Is it because mass communication has gotten to a point where people are used to seeing what they're used to seeing? Or is it that people have gotten tired of seeing what they're seeing? Like,
I
is it more of a, I'm bored of seeing the same thing over and over again, or I'm upset by what I'm seeing?
I
Just to
think
clarify.
the industry is losing creativity, doing
Mhm.
all these woke fluent stuff, like like race swapping instead of the older movie. Just instead of doing that, create a new cast in the story, just like how they did with Black Panther. Black Panther was a fantastic movie with the black cast, black movie, stars and everything, and it was a fantastic. Even the storyline
Crazy
was.
Rich Asians.
Yeah, Crazy Rich Asians, and nowadays if you say that, that's become, it's a racist thing to do, like. But when that came in, it was a fantastic movie.
I love
Nowadays,
that
I don't.
movie.
You'll have a backlash if you do that.
Yeah, but I love that movie.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
Right. And you know what? there was also this thing that I was thinking about with respect to movies, how it influences audiences. And I understand that there's a rating system in place to protect certain audiences. There's this whole PG, this is PG, this is PG-13, this is rated adult. But honestly, age is just a number. Age does not correspond with wisdom. Now, if you bear that to be fact, if that is true, then how are you using that as a rating system? Is that really protecting audiences? You have audiences getting in, acting, thinking that they're superheroes. You have, because of the proliferation of superhero movies, I don't actually mean that there is a high statistic of people jumping off of buildings. I should hope not. But there was an instance where, like, way back, India had this TV program called Shaktiman, where there were people, like kids who were being rescued by Shaktiman, and there were children who just like, there was news that there were children who jumped off of buildings just so that Shaktiman could come and rescue them. And that obviously
dangerous.
Could have said that that was down to the parents, but that is something that you need to be cognizant of. Movies have to put up disclaimers. Like, you should not stop yourself from creating fantasy just because this can be a potential impact. But keep that in mind. And like, parents or people from the society, like society needs to take shoulder a certain responsibility. But since we're talking about production and movie houses, like, let's say that movie houses should also take in a certain degree of responsibility. Like, if you look at the impact on culture today, movies drive a certain kind of behavior with the adult populace. Like, you see these tales of men being rejected by women, but then they being steadfast and then pursuing these women over and over and over until they wear these women down. Now, that is true, is desirable, is maybe workable in certain scenarios, but not generally. And that is not the sort of behavior that you want to promote. That is not the sort of behavior that you want to push to a sensitive audience that may not have that they may not be able to absorb and react to it properly. Like, let's be a little more responsible in terms of how much content we push that pushes certain kinds of behavior, is what I'm driving at. Because these PGs, A's, ratings don't seem to have a lot of meaning when it comes to societal impact.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the PG-13, the R-rated, they don't matter in India. You know, you see.
Oh, they are just snipped out, right? Like, no, they're just outright snipped out.
Yeah.
No, the censor board plays a role here. The censor board does control content to an extent, but at the same time, you still see societal behavior which is like, when people criticize the patriarchy, they're not doing that for the heck of it. There is fault in the way that society has treated women to a great extent. And there are remedial measures that are being taken. And there is still a large aspect of society that isn't or does not seem to know how to behave, which is why you're continuing to have these austere measures against part of society at the end of the day. And I think that this is heavily influenced by movies. I'm going to end my monologue there. Moving on. Talk to me about generative AI. What do you think about the prospects of that and its use in movies? We were talking about generative AI replacing writers. So
I think more, just not the writers, the movie casting itself, like how in AI you can build an entire cast inside it. Like build like they have these artificial sets with generative AI, right? So even the entire thing, the Shah Rukh Khan's movie,
it was, okay, I was thinking like Mandalorian.
Mandalorian too, but even it looked like a game, right? It looked like GTA 5 Pathan movie, the Shah Rukh Khan's new movie. That was AI.
I haven't watched it. I used to be a big Shah Rukh Khan fan, and I don't know, somewhere there was a drop off. somewhere there isn't a demand meets supply sort of a response there. And
No,
I
but
don't know the numbers, therefore, who am I to judge? But like personal preference wise, not very pleased with the latest spiel that's being generated from Bollywood. Anyway, so there's that. But what I was getting at is when you were talking about generative AI taking up writers' jobs, I was thinking you can also use generative AI to, like, we are using prompt-based AI to create videos. Revolve, I think, does that already. Like, you can create videos using AI. You can upload a specific video scene and then use generative AI to modify it entirely. Then there are instances, and this has been done in Japan for a while now. You can create avatars, whichever way you want to pronounce them. But you can create these virtual avatars that represent whatever you want them to. So brands, as an example, no longer need to rely on influencers or celebrities, because you can't control celebrities, you can't control influencers. Like if they get into controversies, if they do things that aren't, you know, within the ethos of your, or don't embody the ethos of your brand, it shouldn't matter, because you're spending crores upon crores on, or millions and billions of dollars on these people. Millions. I don't think people spend billions of dollars on an individual, but
yeah, they do. Nike.
Who?
Michael Jordan. The Jordans.
That was with the shoes, right? That was with the shoe deal.
The shoe line.
Yeah. Anyway, so rolling back, you can have these avatars that your brand can control. You can have these avatars that, and we should test these out. Let's see whether an audience cares for generative AI. Let's see if it is indeed about the story and not the people depicting it or not the people playing it. Of course, technology has to get to a point where this is a little more seamless. But like, think about it. Animation does so well. Live action sequences like the Lion King story, or I was saying Avatar. Like, let's talk about who did Avatar again? James.
James Cameron, right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, James Cameron. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn,
So sorry. Cameron's Avatar did fantastically well. Like, it was a box office hit. So people clearly don't. So it's the story matters, right? Like, Avatar 1, people were like, yeah, that's fantastic. Avatar 2, people had an opinion. They were like, not as good, not as strong a storyline, repetitive, whatever. But people went and watched it. It was a box office hit. So clearly, it isn't that I need to see a human being necessarily. Also, AI has gotten to a point where it can create a human likeness. So, like, not getting into the hole that causes in terms of security and privacy, it is something that can be used to generate content. Now, you don't need to rely on actors, actresses, models, influencers. You don't need to rely on them as a brand. You can create your own content. Maybe we are going to see a future where actors and actresses' roles are marginalized, and maybe this is the golden age to be an actor. Who knows?
Should try a shot.
Yeah, I think it's a little late for me. And I was also told I was a terrible actor.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It wasn't hurtful. It has colored my head.
As a conclusion, what do you want to say?
As a conclusion, I would like to say that there are a couple of other things that I wanted to get at, dude. That in terms of a breakdown, I wanted to say that over recent times, we've seen a focus on fantasy. We've seen a lot of comic book heroes come to life. We've seen a lot of book adaptations come to life. But back in the day, you had movies like Enemies at the Gates or Godfather. Today we have Avatar or the Marvel Project. I was also talking about the whole impact of sex as well, right? Like that can also be slotted under the whole fantasy genre. So in terms of a breakdown, just to do a quick recap and then maybe proceed to the formula, the point of this particular conversation. Like, entertainment today or movies today are woke-fluenced. They are focused on what is marketable, as opposed to like, this is a great story to tell, which essentially is pushing an ecosystem, right? Like it is essentially pushing, what was Disney's thing again? I'm gonna move over that
Anyway,
because I understand.
So I think when you talk about generative AI, I think CGI integrated with generative AI will make a huge difference in future. When it comes to like how well it looks. Like if you look at these new modern video games, right? They look super real, super real. I think.
And you have AI that controls their storylines as well, right? Like cutscene and video.
Yeah. So imagine movies being built without huge amounts and being splurged on these sets, but on CGI, which is being done through generative AI. If they're able to do that, they can probably eliminate the building new construction for like lavish settings, like
Rely on AI to
exactly.
reduce your environmental impact. How very
Yeah,
ECG of you.
ECG, ESG
ESG,
friendly.
sorry. All right, so how do you write a hit? We've
How
talked
do
about
I?
the trends, we've talked about a breakdown. Now to the crux of it, the point of how to write a Hollywood hit. How do you write a hit? I think you were talking about genres, right?
I
Like
think
comedy.
two things, man. It's just the storyline and the director. I think if you can mend it well, he can actually bring any actor to light. Like Christopher Nolan, if we take, I think he can bring the best out of any actor.
Okay.
That's
So
my
all of future's hopes are like all of Hollywood's hopes are pinned on Christopher Nolan and his shoulders.
no. I
Understand?
mean, if you look at
That's not a
Martin,
formula.
so it's
No,
not a
like
formula. There's no formula. Art cannot be a formula. So it's subjective, right?
I beg to differ. Like we were discussing this prior to this conversation, right? Like the impact of Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. There is a structure to a lot of great stories that have like put a hero through a journey. Like they receive a call, they go through a journey, they then come up and face the adversary or whatever challenge they needed to overcome, and they become stronger. And there is a formula. There is very much so a formula. But I think in terms of writing a hit today, you need to pay attention to a few things, and I'm going to list them out really quick. One is look at what people care about. There is a lot of content out there in terms of like today we've been empowered to a point where you can record movies and shorts from using your phone. The phone camera is fantastic. And like you had pointed out, comedy is a massively popular genre, and that's something that you can is very evident on social media. Look at social media, leverage data and analytics to understand what kind of conversations people are interested in. Sci-fi, comedy, those are things that you can definitely see prevalent on social media. Second thing is don't fall prey to lazy wokeism. Like be
Mm.
original, don't gender swap, don't just bring in diversity for the sake of it. Create original plot lines where these characters actually shine. You're going to do yourself a favor if you are bringing these things from the ground up and not just taking an existing storyline and swapping it like Netflix and Cleopatra. Oh, that was an utter disaster.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
reported online too on Rotten Tomatoes.
yeah, it was quite rotten, and
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes acknowledged it. Give the audience something to mull over. We are a thinking audience. We pride ourselves in being intelligent. Challenge the audience, make them think. Like Inception did it with the ending, or Game of Thrones did. Like you never knew who was going to die next. All the way until season
The
8.
end of the series. That was long, bro.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
finally, I'd like to say that studios and directors need to be a little more responsible with the sort of content that they push out. Like I said, age being just a number, there are sensitive audiences. Governments or regulatory bodies need to step in, need to really focus on how stories can impact people. And like film is just has a very powerful societal impact. Age does not speak to wisdom. how can we rely on age-based ratings? You are filming for the masses. You can't neglect that. So please consider that. Those are my closing lines.
Fantastic, man. That was quick, though. You did a quick job on the closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, I realized that we were running quite late into this, but I was very, very impassioned about this topic.
Well, that was, I think that was, we covered all the topics on it. Yeah.
This was our longest podcast, like 45 minutes.
Yeah, 45 minutes, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope you guys got value out of that. Thank you for listening. I hope I didn't bore you guys to death. Sailesh, closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Sorry for
wonderful closing thoughts.
Long monologue.
Right. All right. Thank you, guys. See you on the next one.